Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Duduzile Kupeka, the mathematical literacy teacher for grade 12. On the first slide, you'll see my email address. So if you have any questions related to mathematical literacy, feel free to send me your questions. Yesterday, we had started the topic of inflation, right? So I need us to continue on that topic. So here, these were the first slides we did yesterday. I'm just gonna move through them quickly and go to those graphs we're busy with. Yeah? You remember we're doing the graphs of the increase in price, and then I also showed you the graphs of this one. We did this graph increasing price, right? Where the price and the different years. Then we also covered the inflation rate. So we used the formula for calculating inflation rate taken from the one of the prices, the increasing in prices. And then the main point was to compare how these graphs differ from each other and how we should read and analyze the graphs. The points here were, we'll remember the ones we were focused on a lot. Although the graph decreases from 36.8, which was the year 2008 to 2009, it does not correlate to a decrease in the price of bread. The bread price actually increased from 7 Rand 18 cents to 7 Rand 40 in this period. The decreasing graph indicates that the rate of increase was much lower. This is explaining why in the inflation rate graph, you will see a decreasing inflation rate for the years 2009 and 2010, even though the price of bread for those years had increased. What this explains is that the price, yes, did increase, but it increased at a very low rate, therefore decreasing the inflation rate from 36.8 to 3.1. The price still increased, but by a smaller percentage. This is summing up yesterday's work. Ne? And then a marker. What is a marker? That is an object used to indicate a position or place. You'll notice the marker of, let's go back to the one of the graphs here. This graph. The markers are these ones in red. These ones, the markers, I'm trying to write it down for you so you can see which ones I'm talking about. Okay, I'll use the purple color. These ones in red, these ones here, those are the markers I'm talking about. Those are our markers. They'll show you the exact position. Yeah? Usually when you draw your graph, you probably just put a dot there on the marker. So those are the markers that I'm referring to. The marker of negative 1.9% at January 2011 to January 2012. This marker is a negative value positioned below the axis. It indicated that the price decreased, and then by comparing the two graphs, the price change over this period was from 8 Rand 31 to 8 Rand 15. Let's go see what we are talking about. This one here, you'll see that this one went to negative 1.9% for this year, January 2011 to January 2012. It decreased and went to a negative 1.9%. Why is it in a negative? This then indicates that there was a decrease in price as well. It wasn't just a decrease in the inflation rate, but also a decrease in the price. That is why we have a negative inflation rate. I hope you understand the difference. With the other ones, the inflation rate was increasing. The prices was increasing, ne? But the inflation rate would increase, decrease, increase, decrease. Ne? But in this one in particular, we have a negative value to show that there was a decrease in price and also a decrease in the inflation rate. So that's how we can tell the difference between a decrease in price and an increase in price when working with the inflation rates. Where there was a decrease in price, you will see a negative value. So, in summary, when dealing with graphs showing inflation rates, a decreasing graph does not necessarily indicate a decrease in price, but rather an increase in price at a lower rate. So the graph may decrease, but that does not mean the price has decreased. You will see that that's what we were discussing the entire lesson yesterday. But rather an increase in price at a lower rate. So that's what you need to remember when you're comparing these graphs and reading them. Then the most important point we just touched on now, a marker with a negative value or that is positioned below the horizontal axis indicates a decrease in price. So whilst looking at your graph, let's just go to this one graph once again. When you're looking at your graph here, it's increasing, but here it's decreasing, then it's increasing. But in all these parts, from January 2006 to January 2011, the price of bread kept on increasing, but the inflation rate was increasing and decreasing at different times. But then from Jan 2010 to 11, then you move on to compare Jan 2011 to 2012. There was a decrease in price, and that is why it resulted in a negative inflation rate. So those are the 2 points I need you to always remember when you are reading your graphs. They won't always give you the values, but by just looking at the position of the markers, you can be able to determine whether the price had increased or decreased for that particular year. And then now, this is an activity we are working on now. It's taken from Via Africa Mathematical Literacy Grade 12. Consider the graph alongside. What information is shown in the graph? Let's look at this graph together. The South Africa inflation or percentage change from February 2007 to February 2008. We've got food on the y-axis, there's food, clothing, furniture and equipment, medical care, vehicle, communication, education, personal care, fuel and power. Then we've got our values, different values on the x-axis. Okay. You will see that on the axis there, I hope you can draw graphs and you can understand how to read graphs. Yeah? Let me try and show you. I'm trying to draw it here. I'll erase it just now. When you draw your graph, you remember the Cartesian plane, right? It's like this. You've got your y-axis there, and you've got your x-axis here. Then on this side, you've got positive x-axis values. On this other side, on the left, you've got negative x-axis values. This is when we are focusing on the x-axis. I want to show you, I want to use a different color for the Y one now so that it's not confusing. And then the y-axis, up here, you've got positive values. And then down here, you've got negative values for the y-axis. This is the same way you will read this graph. You will notice this line here, where all these points start. That would be your line indicating your y-axis, né? And then this one would be indicating your x-axis, which means at this point here, down here in red, where I'm showing you, that's where it's separating the negative x and the positive x. I hope you can follow that. I wanted to make that clear before we continue with this reading the graph. Then now, what information is shown in the graph? Please type your answers in the chat box or raise your hand. What information is presented to us in this graph here? What can you read from this graph? What can you deduce from the graph? Okay, we are seeing the information is the inflation rate from February 2007 to February 2008. Okay, that is a correct answer. It would pass. It is the inflation rates for various items over the 1-year period from February 2007 to February 2008. So Lisedi would get this one correct. That's what we understood from this graph, right? Simple enough. Now, let's move on to the next question. Why are some bars positioned to the right and some to the left? I hope you are busy typing on your chat screens there, please. I'm waiting for your answers. Why are some positioned to the left and others positioned to the right? Okay, I see here you're saying the ones that are positioned to, okay, Lisa, Tsepang didn't finish typing. They are moving into the negative percentage. Which ones are moving to the negative percentage? And which ones? Let's break them down. Which ones? Let's look at the ones on the left, moving to the left, and then the ones moving to the right. I need you to be clear in your answer. Which ones are moving to the negative and which ones are moving to the positive? Sorry, Tapan is saying to the left indicates negative and to the right shows positive. Okay, so the ones going to the left, they're showing a negative percentage. Ne? The ones to the right are showing a positive percentage. What does the negative and positive percentages mean? In terms of inflation, this is what we just discussed and we discussed yesterday. What does it mean when you have a negative inflation rate and what does it mean when you have a positive inflation rate? Yes, Leanne, thank you for that. The ones moving to the negative are the furniture and vehicle and equipment. So now the next question is the one that I just asked is that what does it mean when we have the negative inflation rate and what does it mean when we have a positive inflation rate? So for the ones moving to the left, we have deduced that they have a negative inflation rate. The ones moving to the right have a positive inflation rate. But what exactly does that mean? Explain it as if you were explaining it to your five-year-old. Yes, thank you so much, Tsepang. That's true. A negative inflation rate to the left means the prices have decreased. So the bars, there's the full answer here, but we've already answered it together, right? The bars positioned on the right-hand side indicate the categories of items which experienced No, this is my mistake now here. Okay. Which experienced negative inflation over this period. This means this is where prices have increased. And then the bars positioned on the left-hand side indicate the categories of items which have experienced negative inflation over this period. No, this was supposed to be positive inflation. Positive inflation over this period. Where prices have decreased. Yes, that's fixed. The bars positioned on the right, they indicate categories of items which have experienced negative inflation. Negative inflation means, because inflation is an increase in prices, right? So negative inflation means it's increasing. The prices have increased. And then the ones on the left, they indicate that the prices have decreased. That's why you have the inflation rate moving towards the negative. So in simple terms, we can say it like that. The ones moving to the right indicate that the prices have increased and therefore the inflation rate has increased. The ones on the left, it shows that the prices have decreased and therefore the inflation has decreased. Which item experienced the greatest inflation rate over this period? Which item? Guys, when we read the graph, it's quite quick. So let's try and be quick to respond, especially when it's graph questions related to the graph, so that we can cover a lot more things in the session. Yes, thank you, guys. It's the food. Food here is the one that has shown the greatest inflation rate over this period. What was the rate of the food? What is that rate that it has increased by? Trying to locate it myself here. Let's see. I can't move straight. No, there's no way it's 15%. 15% is here. Here. And that line, that faint green line. And this is not touching that faint gray line. So there's no way it's 15%. 15%, let's see here. 15%, you see, it seems to be touching the faint gray line. But here, it is not touching that faint gray line. Yeah, maybe 14.5 there, ne? 14.5, 14.8 would also pass, just not 15. As long as your answer is not, it doesn't touch 15%, then yeah, you might be correct. But if you say 15%, it will definitely be wrong because we can clearly see 15% is touching this line and that line here doesn't touch the faint gray line. So as long as it doesn't say 15% and it is less than 14.5, then you'd be wrong. Anywhere between 14.5 to less than 15, that would pass. So you need to make sure you get the answer within the correct range. And then which item experienced the lowest inflation rate over this period? you saying communication when we have items here on the negative? Okay. Explain to me why. Let's explain that part. Okay, now you are changing your answers. I want you to explain why we have communication and not the others that are on the negative side. Okay, thank you, Leanne. Give the rate. It was a 2.7%. That's what we are learning on around communication there. It's around 2.7. Ne? As long as your answer is above 2.5, but less than, let's say less than 3. Ne? Above 2.5, but less than 3%, then yeah, thank you for your answers, everyone. I agree. So as long as this one, as long as your answer is between greater than 2.5 plus, but less than 3%, you should be correct. Which items experienced a decrease? So I'm glad you could differentiate the two categories, ne? Those two, the one like you guys have, Leanne and William have answered us in the chat box. Which items experienced a decrease in price? Furniture and equipment, as well as vehicles. Thank you. And then, by reading the graph, estimate the inflation rates for each item shown in the graph. So we are estimating inflation rates for each item shown in the graph. So we'll need an answer for the food. What is the, we've already found the food one, ne? We've already given the answer for that. But give me the ones we haven't given answers for. Give me the ones from clothing. So except for food and communication, give me the inflation rates for the others. Thanks, Leanne. So there is everything there. We've got clothing, furniture and equipment. There is medical care. There is vehicles. We've got education. We've got personal care. We've got fuel and power. Let's look at clothing there. Clothing is definitely above 7.5. So any value above 7.5, but less than 9 then, yeah. Furniture and equipment, we have furniture equipment at negative 2.4. I think that is quite clear to see there. There's 2.4, negative 2.4. And then medical care at exactly 5%. So that one was the easiest. Vehicles at about negative 2.3. It could also be negative 2.2 or negative 2.1. I see Leanne here. It really could be as well. It could, negative 1.7 could also pass really, because it's not really clear where the point of 1 is, but it is definitely above negative 1. Yes, so it would also be correct. And then we've got education at about 7%, Personal care at about 6%. Yeah, that would pass as well. And fuel and power at about 7.5%. It's exactly 7.5%. So here, these are free marks. As long as you can read your graph and you give the correct range, then you'll be fine. Or the correct value within the range. Let me say that. So this graph here, the next one here now, the graph alongside shows the prices of an item over time. The price values for what item are shown on the graph? Which item are we talking about here? The one on the graph. Five kilograms of maize meal. A 5-kilogram bag of maize meal. The next question, describe the general trend in the price of this item over the period of January 2008 to January 2012. What is the general trend here? We'll see that from 2008, it's increasing, né? It's increasing up until 2009, July 2009. Ne? It's been increasing. And then when it got from July 2009 to July 2010, it decreases. Then it picks up again from July 2010 to Jan 2011. Jan 2011 to July, it decreases. It increases again from July to Jan. So it seems like every time around Jan to July, it increased a lot of times. But oftentimes from July to Jan, it's been decreasing. So the general trend of this graph, it shows an increase in the price of maize meal, starting at 21 rand 8 cents in January 2008 and increasing to 29 rand 70 cents by January 2012. However, there have been periods where the price has also decreased, but overall, the trend has been an increase in price. So because they specifically asked for the general trend, you look at the beginning, what was your price? It's 21 rand 8 cents, and then at the end, it's 29 rand 70. So the general trend is that this has increased, even though during the life of that, between the other years of 2009, 10, 11, the prices kept on decreasing at certain times. But the overall trend is that in the beginning, in January 2008, you started off at 21 rand 8 cents. And when you ended up in Jan 2012, you were at 29 rand 70. That's why the general trend shows an increase, even though during the periods, it kept on decreasing. Okay, quickly, Lisedi. Lisedi wants the 2.1, just quickly. It was just the bag of maize meal. It was asking what item are we dealing with in this graph. So we are dealing with the price of the increase of price in bag of maize meal. So it's just the bag of maize meal, Nelly said. In which time periods did the price of the item decrease? In which time periods did it increase? Did it decrease, man? Did the price go down? These time periods here. The price went down from July 2009 to Jan 2010, and then it also decreased again from Jan 2010 to July 2010. It also decreased again in Jan 2011 to July 2011. So those are the time periods, the ones I've just explained. You just look at your graph where it's decreasing. Those are the time periods where it was decreasing. And then question 4, between which two time periods did the price of the item increase the most? Explain how you found out your answer. Here, I need you to provide me with the answer. In which two time periods did the price of the item increase the most? Keyword being the most. It increased at most times here, but at which place did it increase the most? We can see here, ne? From July 2011 up to Jan 2012. That's where the most increase was observed. This is where the graph is the steepest. That's how you would explain how you found your answer. You'd say this is where the graph is the steepest, which indicates the greatest increase in price. The answer could also be determined by seeing that from July 2011 to January 2012, the price increased by 5 Rand 75, which is a bigger increase than for any other period. So any of those answers, if you can just say you were looking at the graph, it's clear to see that this part here is the steepest out of all of these other parts. Yeah? This one here is also quite steep, but this one is the steepest out of all these other parts. So that's one way of explaining how you found your answer. The other one could be, you'd say you did your calculations where you would compare those two parts. Oh, I don't know what happened here. Okay, where you'd compare, you probably compare this one and this other period. Then you'd state that from your calculations, it shows that the greatest increase was between this time, and you give the value from those calculations. So any of those two answers would be correct. But remember, this is a two-part question. You first need to indicate in which part did you experience the most increase, and then you need to explain how you found your answer. So two parts to this question. Don't just answer one and move on. Okay, this was supposed to be a homework for yesterday, which was exercise 6, number 2.5 from Via Africa, but I'll make the worksheet available for you. And then inflation rates, ne? Whilst discussing inflation rates, you'll see that the price of food items, or of general items, not just food, of items overall, they increase from time to time. It's mostly an increase in prices than we've experienced a decrease in price. A decrease in price is quite rare, if you have noticed from the graphs. So inflation rates would usually be increasing most of the time anyway. But inflation rates, they inform salary negotiations. So you'd hear from people who are working there, and they'd say probably every year or so they get an increase in their salaries. Why is there review of the salaries every year? It's because the inflation rates keep on changing every year. They keep on changing from time to time, as we've seen with the price of this 5-kilogram maize meal, as well as with bread and all other items. In this one year, it would be probably 10 rands. The next year, it's 11 rands. It means the prices keep on changing. But the salary, there's no way the salary should remain the same. Because if your salary remains the same, but the inflation rate keeps on increasing, then it's not a fair deal anymore. And the deal you would have heard probably in 2010, let's say you start your job in 2010, you're getting paid 10,000 rands. If you are still getting paid the same money for the same job in 2020, then that is not a fair deal, because the price of things have increased greatly from 2010 to 2020. So you were probably getting paid more in 2010 than you are getting paid now. Because for the same amount of money, you are getting way less items now, as opposed to the ones you would get in 2010 with the same amount of money. This is also explaining the value of money. Remember when we explained the value of money and how it decreases as time passes by? That is why then there's a need for the consideration of inflation rates when determining people's salaries. It influences the decisions that business unions and workers make regarding salaries or fee increases. Because you'd see, even at schools, right, the fees would probably increase every year by 100 rands or by 1,000 rands or by, whatever amount. And if your mother or your parents or your guardian's salary remains the same, then it's no longer fair, and they can't really maintain that standard of living with the same salary, even though everything else is increasing around them. So this table here shows the previous and current costs of the most essential expenditure items for a typical parent. So this is a parent, someone's parent. Ne? So let's say it's my mother. Let's say that. Okay. Or it's Tabo's mother. We have Tabo. This is Tabo's mother. Tabo's mother spends these towards these things. These are Tabo's mother's expenses. There's transport, school fees, groceries, and accommodation they are renting. Ne? The previous monthly cost. So let's say this is May. In April, it cost her 850 rands for transport. School fees, it was 725 rands. Groceries, it was 3,500. Accommodation, it was 2,800. But in this month, May, the transport costs have suddenly increased to 910. School fees have increased to 750. Groceries have increased to 4,200. Accommodation has increased to 3,100. You will notice that the inflation rate, if you calculate the inflation rate, remember the formula, which is new cost minus new price minus old price over old price multiplied by 100. This is how this inflation rate was calculated. Here, you'll see that the inflation rate has increased for all these items here. The overall inflation rate has increased by 13.78%. Yeah? This mother used to spend about 7,875 rands towards these expenses, but she now spends about 8,960 rands towards these expenses. Now imagine, we see here, the total increase in expenditure is 1,085 rands. So she's spending an extra 1,085 rands than she used to. This person needs to earn at least 1,085 rands extra per month just to pay his expenses. If he previously earned 10,000 rands per month, then his salary would need to become 10,000 rands plus 1,085 rands, which is equal to 11,085 rands. This gives the following percentage increase in salary. You take the difference, the new price minus old price, that's where you found this difference, right? Over the old price. And then multiply by this, by 100%. No man, let me clarify that explanation once again. To find out the percentage increase in salary, we have this difference here, the difference in expenses here, this total increase in expenditure. This is what we have here at the top numerator. This is over what the current salary multiplied by 100. So the increase in expenditure divided by the current salary multiplied by 100%, 100 would inform by how much should the salary increase, because the expenses have increased by this much. That's what applies when they are negotiating for salaries. So this parent right here would negotiate for a 10.85% increase in their salary. Meaning in the previous year, if they earned 10,000 rands, they now want to earn 11,085 rands. And you'll notice that from these calculations, their life won't change, their lifestyle won't change, because they would still be spending towards the same items. The only difference now is that these items are more expensive than they used to be. So it's unlike a point where the items did not increase, they're still the same and you are just getting an increase. No, this is different. Right here, the increase is based on the fact that even the items have increased in prices. There are two important issues to notice from this example. The required percentage increase in salary is less than the percentage increase for the total expenditure items. We'll see here, it's 13.78. Remember when we calculated the total increase expenditure, we found that the overall inflation rate for her items are 13.78%. And when we calculate the increase in salary, it's 10.85. The original salary at 10,000 rands is bigger than the original expenditure total of 7,875. That was the initial expenditure total. You see, we did that calculation. A smaller percentage, which is that 10.85 increases the salary by the same amount. In other words, 13.78% multiply by the 7,875 rands equals the 10.85% multiplied by the 10,000. I hope you can see what I'm comparing here. Here I'm comparing the one we did of the inflation rate based on the parents' expenses. This one. This is the total expense, this one, the 7,875 rands. That was the total expenses before the increases, right? And the 13.78 is the percentage of the inflation rate, by how much the inflation, that the prices have increased by. So we multiply that by the original cost of expenses. And then we can see that this calculation equals that of the expected percentage increase in salary multiplied by the original salary. You can see that difference, right? Those ones we are noting. This is where this one I'm referring to. This is where the 13.78 is coming from. 13.78% multiplied by the original 7,800. The percent increase in salary. The national inflation rate is calculated on over 400 items. We discussed this, ne? Many of these items may have no relevance to this parent. Also, if the main expenses for this parent have each increased at higher rates than the national rate, then inflation for this parent will be higher than average. So we said national inflation rate is based on various items. You might find that the main expenses for Tabo's mother here in this case are not even in the inflation basket. So that in that case, the inflation rate means absolutely nothing to Tabo's mother because it doesn't inform anything about her decisions. So that is it for today. There's no time anymore, guys. See you Monday where we are doing past papers. Ne? We'll cover a lot more questions then. This was just going to be examples and activities. So from Monday, we are doing past papers based on the finance section. If you have any questions, you are free to send me an email. Limondre, I will get back to you. I know I said I'll get back to you. I will. Are you guys fine? Thank you. If you have any question, quickly type it in before we are cut out of class. So on Monday, please come with your calculators and worksheets and everything because I will need you to be doing calculations along with me in class. Ne? It will be very interactive because I'm not teaching. I'll be doing calculations with you guys. We are working together on Monday. It's 1 o'clock, Dominic, every day, Monday to Friday. It's at 1 p.m.